Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. You know, an often overlooked public office in New Hampshire is that of serving as a governor's counselor on the New Hampshire Executive Council. And you know, that's actually really kind of surprising because the Executive Council has so much to say about what happens in the state, particularly with regard to how the state spends our money. Now, former Manchester Mayor Ray Wazorek served as our governor's counselor for several years, but when he announced his retirement, a very spirited race for the seat ensued, which included actually 2 Bedford residents. The winner in the final election was Democrat Chris Pappas of Manchester, who took office in January, and now he's a veteran because he has already suffered through 4-day-long council meetings, and he's fully immersed in a wide variety of issues. And as you can see, Chris is here tonight to fill us in on what's going on, and I think he's probably going to weigh in on a topic or two. Now, just to kind of refresh your memories, because it's been a while, Chris is no stranger to this show because he was on at least twice, I think for the
3 times,
campaign,
actually.
and then the debate, the live debate that we did, and we were just reminiscing here that was the night of the earthquake, and while we're all up at our little podiums, the lights were shaking, and we weren't quite sure what was going to happen, but we forged on ahead.
We were very focused on the topic, so we didn't flinch.
Well, Chris is a lifelong New Hampshire resident, and he's now serving as the District 4 New Hampshire Executive Councilor for the Executive Council, which I and a lot of other people always refer to as the Governor's Council. And he was elected to that in 2012 after what I said was a very spirited race. Now, in addition to representing Bedford, he also serves the city of Manchester, as well as the towns of, and there's not like a gazillion, so I'll say them, the towns of Allenstown, Auburn, Barrington, Bow, Candia, Chichester, Deerfield, Epsom, Goffstown, Hooksett, Lee, Londonderry, Loudon, Northwood, Nottingham, Pembroke, and Pittsfield. So you can see it's kind of really spread out, and that was a result of their redistricting. Now, after his Manchester school background, Chris graduated in 2002 from Harvard University with a degree in government, and he then came back to Manchester to co-own and operate the Puritan Restaurant, which inarguably is a New Hampshire landmark. And it was founded by his great-grandfather in 1917, so it's almost 100 years old. You're going to have a big party we all get to come to?
We've already started planning and blowing up the balloons for that.
Yeah?
But,
Am I going to get an
invitation? It should be a fun
invitation?
celebration. Absolutely.
All right.
We should do a segment on it.
Hey, we could.
Yeah.
That'd be fun, yeah. I mean, 100, how many? That's probably the oldest restaurant in the state.
I'm sure within the same family ownership.
Yeah,
yes,
it must be,
definitely.
yeah. Wow. Well, anyway, getting back to business, in 2002, he was elected to the first of 2 terms in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and there he served on both the Ways and Means and the Finance Committees. So he thus played a pretty big role in crafting state budgets. And then in 2006, he was elected to the first of 2 terms as the Hillsborough County Treasurer. And while he was treasurer, he returned $5 million to taxpayers by making very smart investments with county funds. Chris has been very active in community service, and among his many civic activities, he served as a Board of Directors member with both Southern New Hampshire Services and with the Manchester Historic Association, which is probably the most active historic association in the state, I think. So anyway, Chris, here you are. As I said, the veteran of 4 long, dragged-out meetings when they hand you a pile that big of paperwork, huh? Do you get it ahead of time, or they throw it all at you that morning?
We actually get it ahead of time.
Yeah?
We get the agenda the Friday before our Wednesday meeting, and it's delivered to our home by a state trooper, actually.
No kidding.
And so it had my neighbors wondering the first few meetings when
Yeah,
the state
yeah.
trooper was dropping off the agenda. But it comes in a large bag, and there's a lot of paperwork involved. One of the things that the governor and councilors are very interested in working on right now is streamlining the process, putting it all on computers, starting
It seems as though that'd be easier.
starting the contracting process back in the departments so it all gets electronic and feeds into one system. So we're hoping to bring something like that online this coming year. It would be really efficient, save us a lot of money.
Yeah, people always used to laugh when they'd see some of the clerks at the State House like wheeling these carts in there with all these folders.
Yes, yeah. We've progressed a little bit, and it's just a matter of time before the governor and council need to catch up to that.
Yeah, well, that'd be a good thing, huh?
Yeah.
Well, just a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this while you were a candidate. I had asked you your opinion, but just a couple of weeks ago, the Governor's Council voted 4-1 to accept a $3.6 million federal grant for a study of the feasibility of extending the commuter rail into New Hampshire. And of course, as we all know, that same grant was denied by the council last year. Now, from what I understand, the state share of the new study will be funded through taking some of the highway tolls, correct?
Turnpike toll credits.
Turnpike toll credits,
so
okay.
It's actually not going to cost the state any money, but those are credits that the federal government reimburses the state for doing work on the turnpike system.
Oh, okay. So they're not actually saying, okay, we're grabbing 300,000 of that?
Well, we are using those credits for this project.
But the government will give it back?
It's coming from the federal government, but it's going to be, decreasing the amount that's going to be available for a future project. So
okay.
essentially, it is, substituting state for federal dollars.
Okay. Now, with so many studies having been done, and I realize that they have to stay up to date with maybe new environmental rules or things like that might have gotten passed. But I mean, it seems like it's only a couple of years since the last study, so why do they need yet another study?
Well, I believe, by the time this is completed, it will have been about a decade since it was last seriously studied. And I think it's a good idea, and not one that we should enter into lightly, but one that we should make sure we have all the facts and figures on the table. And this was one I talked a lot about in the campaign. I know we did a segment or two in our interviews on this. And this issue started where private businesses in our state raised more than $120,000 to apply for this federal grant that was available. It wasn't going to come to New Hampshire without an application. It was a competitively, sought-after thing. It would have gone to another state had New Hampshire not been awarded the money. It was coming to New Hampshire to study the feasibility of extending passenger rail from Boston through Nashua, Manchester, and Concord. And the last council voted it down because it didn't believe in the viability of rail. But what I think we should do...
Well, I thought they had a problem, though, with what the state had to kick in.
Well, and there was a funding question, too. But I think a lot of folks prejudged the issue of rail and just didn't think it was something that was going to work in New Hampshire, so didn't feel like voting for it. I don't know if it's feasible, but I think that's what the study's going to tell us. It's going to tell us the economic impacts. It's going to tell us what it would do for the Manchester airport in terms of attracting new passengers, and what it would do for our communities in terms of economic development. So I think it's something that, where we were awarded this grant, and I think the money is available, so it doesn't really, hurt the state's coffers at all. That's something we should go forward with a serious study this next year, find out what the details is, and then either go ahead with something or put it to rest. One of the long-term questions is how would something like this be funded?
Yeah,
and so that's got to be something that's addressed in this study in terms of costing it out. Where would stations be located? What sort of public input is on this issue, and there would be some sessions where the public would have direct input through this study. So I think it's an important look that we should do because it does have significant economic impacts and does have impacts on our quality of life and our transportation system. And so if we're going to be serious about being forward thinking about our system of transportation, it's something that should be on the table and should be included.
Well, I think one of the concerns that a lot of people have, and I guess I'll include myself in it, is it's one thing to build it, but then, the operating costs obviously are high every year. And I mean, it just doesn't seem reasonable to think that New Hampshire will be different than any other commuter system in the country, and that ticket fares will pay the bill. I mean, it almost seems inevitable that we would have to have some taxpayer subsidy. And I think that's a sticking point for a lot of people.
I think it is, and I think that's one of the right questions to ask. We've been subsidizing bus travel in this state, and we've gotten to the point where some of our bus lines are actually, making money and are, turning a profit in terms of what our investment has been. So I think that's one of the questions that's got to be answered.
Of course, a bus line's a lot cheaper than a train.
That's
right.
You
buy the buses.
That's right.
Maybe build a terminal, which they did.
And there's been some, good federal money that's been available for states to invest in bus service. And New Hampshire's taken advantage of that. We've got, the Boston Express, which runs out of
very
Exit 5,
successful, yeah.
is very successful. One of the things that I'd like to see is the airport get more integrated in terms of the state's bus system. It's kind of been cut out of the equation, and there is going to be a new east-west bus service that's starting up.
Oh, there is?
From Portsmouth to the Manchester airport.
Oh, because is there any bus going in right now directly to the airport as a destination?
No, not directly.
No?
Or if it is, it's very infrequent. But sort of the bus lines that run down to Boston are, drawing passengers out of the Manchester area and down to Logan instead. So
Yeah,
I think
sure,
we've got to make
yeah.
Manchester more convenient in terms of, it being a multimodal hub of transportation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out, because obviously it's almost like two armed camps. I get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like a lot of this push this year, and now you're going to get mad at me because now I'm going to talk a little bit partisan. It almost seems as though the Democrats are kind of, I don't know, now that they have the majority in the House, they almost seem kind of bound and determined to maybe kill a lot of the things that the demon that they refer to as Bill O'Brien had something to do with passing in 2012.
Well, here's the beauty of the 2012 election results. I think, we have power shared between the parties. We have a
Not in the House.
well, but the House is controlled by the Democrats. The Senate's controlled by the Republicans. The Executive Council is very closely divided. And I think it causes or will force people to come to the table and work together a little bit better than they have in past experiences where the legislature's been one way or the other. You're going to have a committee of conference on the budget where both sides are going to have to do a give and take on some issues. So, while some things may pass through the Senate easy or pass through the House easy, they're going to have to be reconciled at some point in time. And so I'm hoping that it's going to cause people to come more towards the middle and come away from those camps that we've seen too
That'd
much
be
of on
nice.
either side.
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, maybe it's feelings is still too fresh from the election. I don't know, because it seems as though all we're seeing now is everybody hurling insults back and forth. I mean, that was going on today between the chairman of each party.
Didn't see that one today, but I don't doubt that it goes on.
Yeah, they're at it.
The one beauty of the New Hampshire system is that it's a fair, open process. Any rep can or senator can propose a piece of legislation. It gets a full committee vote, a full hearing, comes to the floor. So you don't have situations in other states where legislation gets bottled up or where an idea can't get a full hearing and get some public input. So anyone can propose anything, which means that you get some things out there that aren't great pieces of legislation and maybe coming from the fringes, but that's all part of the process, and hopefully it gets sorted out.
Do you think the council is capable of kind of keeping party ideas out
I think
of it?
we have so far.
Yeah?
We've got a good group. We happen to have 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, but you wouldn't know it on
Kind
most
of like
of
a
the
reversal
issues.
from last year, right?
Well, there were 5 Republicans and no Democrats
That's
during the
right.
last session.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
a little different in terms of the party makeup, but
Yeah.
really it really hasn't been of any consequence yet in a lot of our debates. In fact, one of the big issues that's come up early was the governor's nomination of Jeff Rose.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
The
Yeah,
Commissioner of the
let's jump
Department of
ahead to that.
Resources and
Yeah.
Economic Development. And, Jeff happens to have a background in Republican politics. The governor's a Democrat, but he's got some great economic development expertise, some good work in the private sector for BAE Systems, some work for members of Congress representing the state of New Hampshire. So he has a pretty full background in terms of economic development.
Why is there so much controversy surrounding him?
Well,
because of his work for BAE? He was a lobbyist, right?
Sure, I think
Is that what's
I think
generating all of this?
with any significant nomination, you get some significant public input, and we had a public hearing last week where we had some folks, particularly from the North Country, that were upset over the Northern Pass issue. I think it's rather misplaced because Mr. Rose, has said he wants to be a fair arbiter and go into this issue with no preconceived
And what,
notions.
are they accusing him of being in the pocket of the power companies?
That's exactly what it is. And so, as part of the process, you've got to ask the questions and, you've got to see where someone stands. And from my judgment, he wants to be a team player and wants to work with the governor. And I think that speaks well of the New Hampshire system where, people can set party aside and really just focus on getting the job done. And in this case, nothing's more important than economic development and having someone in that role who's competent and can get the job done. So
it's up to the council now, right?
That's right.
You have to confirm
it's in
them
the
or not
council's
confirm
hand,
them.
and
Okay.
at our March 6th meeting,
that meeting?
it'll be on the agenda to vote up or down on his nomination.
Got a sense of it yet?
I think he's probably got
I
the
don't want to put
votes.
you on the spot, but I do
He's
sort
probably got the votes, and I'm leaning towards supporting him because
Yeah.
I think he's got a good background. The other side of the department is resources and being a good steward of our state's parks, forests, and public lands. And so, that's one area where he doesn't have a lot of experience, but, he's been working and meeting with folks to try to get up to speed and really, wants to lead by bringing people together and filling in the gaps where he might not be an expert on certain issues. And so,
well, nobody is on everything.
that's right. That's right. You can't be. But the department's mission is unique in that it combines economic development and resources and the environment.
Be nice if they found a different name for it, though, instead of dread.
Instead of dread, you're right. You're right. But in many states, those are two issues that are handled separately, two issue areas. But in New Hampshire, we combine them together, and I think it speaks a lot for our state because a lot of our economic activity, tourism, is derived from our state's natural beauty. And so they're really inextricably linked to New Hampshire. And so I think you've got to have someone leading the department who's well-rounded, or at least will listen to the division heads of forestry and lands and parks and tourism, to get that sort of expertise that's missing. But I think he's a well-qualified individual, and so far he's come through the hearing with flying colors, and have some confidence that he'll lead with distinction.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure why there was that little uproar going on around him. I mean, it didn't seem like he had done something to totally drive people crazy.
Sure.
So I was
very
a little confused by it.
understandably, especially on the Northern Pass issue.
Well, people are very emotional on that.
It
There's
hits,
no question.
it hits home for people because it's about the landscape, the state they love,
definitely.
their natural surroundings, and so I think they rightfully were asking some tough questions.
I'm glad you brought that up because that, as you can see, that was one of my questions to you. Now, the state transportation contract obviously is a big one. Can you tell us about, because I know that this is something that the council's been working on recently, can you tell us about some of maybe its main features and maybe give us updates on, I guess, what would say the most important transportation projects are right now?
Sure. Some of the projects that top the list are certainly the widening of 93. And this is something that's been put off, as we know, for years, and funding is always an issue. But this is a really significant project that's we've started it in certain phases, working on exit 5, working on the Windham exit. We just passed a contract to do the final design work on the northern portion of it, which is the last part to actually be designed.
To Manchester.
That's right. Yeah. It's going to go from Windham, to Manchester. And that's really the lifeline of southern New Hampshire for our future economic development, for the stress of those communities in terms of the traffic that they see on a daily basis. It needs to get done. It's something we've kicked around for 20 or 30 years, and so it's time. So that's the project that's really at the top of everyone's list. But there's so much that's going on and so many needs out there, and it really outstrips the funding that's available. The federal funding isn't keeping pace with our needs, and certainly when you look at the number of red list bridges we have,
I know.
You look at
that's a big one now. Yeah.
You look at the stress that the roads take during the winter months. Yeah. It's significant. So we've got to keep up. We've got to at least maintain what we have, but we've got to be able to invest in those key areas like 93. One of the other projects that's really critical for Bedford is widening portion of 101 from 114 to Wallace Road. That's something that's on the 10-year highway plan to get started at least in 2015, be completed by 2018. Sounds like a long time frame, but that was actually accelerated from what it had been in the past because of folks like Councilor Grzorek who was pushing that project. We've now got a public hearing scheduled on March 20th, actually.
For that?
At the town office at 7 p.m., Wednesday night, March 20th, to get some public input because they are going through...
I didn't realize that. I hadn't seen the notice.
That's right. Yeah, they're going through the design phase of that now, and so...
Now, will this be the council holding the hearing? The governor's council holding the hearing?
No, this will actually just be DOT. Coming to Bedford and wanting to connect with town leaders and folks in the town who may want to offer some input on that important project. So they'll sort of get folks in the town up to speed on where they are and then want to solicit some input in terms of finalizing the design for the project. That's really a key piece of
I
that
asked that
roadway.
because I know at some stage the council does go out for transportation
right.
hearings, and I wasn't sure if that was part of that.
So we're very involved in the setting of the 10-year plan.
Yeah, I know.
And that process
yeah.
will begin later this spring. And we'll go out across our districts and across
Mm-hmm.
the state to identify projects like widening 101, which are significant for local communities. And so we'll be coming to Bedford and other communities to hold hearings and
Mm-hmm.
to get input on what the community sees as its transportation priorities. And then there's a long process in terms of, the council actually setting an agenda of those 10-year
Sure.
priorities, and then the legislature adopting that as the plan.
And finding the money.
That's right. That's usually the last
always
thing
the
to
big
fall in
thing,
place,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I know.
One of the other things we've looked at in terms of transportation, we're completing the bridge, the new Route 3 bridge over the Turnpike. That's something that's been taking a while, but it's going to be done in June of this year.
It will be done?
It will be. That's
well,
when
that's
it will
good.
be completed.
That'll make a lot of people happy.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, it does seem like that kind of went on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like one of those forever things.
It is, and unfortunately, it's not for lack of expertise or lack of a drive on the department's part. They're working with complex systems, and they're working with obviously funding limitations.
Yeah. Now, if and I know that you don't have anything to do with the gas tax, the legislature is going to decide that. I haven't read the whole bill yet, but if it passes, which I'm guessing it's probably going to, but if it passes, the proceeds that come in from it, are they going to dedicate that all to transportation projects, or are we going to see that money start getting diverted around?
I think it would all go to transportation projects, from what I've seen
From what
of the
you've seen so far.
legislation.
Okay.
I haven't been following it, too closely because sometimes you can get in the weeds in
Oh, I
these
know.
legislative fights,
No,
and
I know.
who knows how it's going to come out in
know.
the end. But I think people rightfully are taking a serious look at it, and it actually had a bipartisan vote out of committee recently because people realize that we've got to invest in our infrastructure.
Well, it's been a long time since we had one, but whether or not the timing
That's
is
right.
great, I mean, that's probably the issue.
Right. That's why I've realized my few months on the council. One of the good things is you don't have to wade into these, sticky issues, such as the gas tax. You can kind of sit
they've got a
back.
bunch of them this
you can
year,
kind of sit
yeah.
back and let it happen, and if they do happen to pass it, then we
Yeah.
can work with the Department of Transportation to make sure the right projects are getting funded. So we'll see what happens at the end of the day, but there is a need out there. So
Yeah.
I think it's good people are at least looking at the full picture and the full range of options.
Oh, well, I think everybody just, truth be told, everybody's having a little bit of sticker shock because so many things are coming at us from so many ends, between the federal government and the insurance requirements and different state changes. And I don't know about every town, but certainly Bedford's tax rate is going to go up. And I think the people are just kind of like, stop.
That's right. You
Halt.
look at retirement costs. You look at some
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
costs of state government that have been passed
Yeah.
down to local communities.
Yeah.
There's a lot
That's
that
made a big difference, yeah.
There's a lot that folks at the local level are having to absorb, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, the state's got to look at it. You're going to pay it out of one pocket or the other.
I know.
And so it's too bad that these costs get downshifted.
Well, I guess it's part of living in America, right? Now, another thing that, and I think we even talked about it somewhere in the campaign, the State Liquor Commission has certainly been in the news a lot during recent months. And
Yes.
some of the different things have either been settled or quieted down. But three things in particular kind of come to mind right now. Obviously, the warehouse contract, which is precipitating lawsuits and everything else. The legislative report on the commission, and then now obviously there is a move to change the structure of the commission and go to one commissioner. Now I'm thinking that you on the council get to deal on all those, don't you? All those three subjects?
Well, interestingly, in terms of the contract,
Yeah.
we don't get to deal with that.
Not at
because
all.
There was a legislative change a couple years back to make the commission an enterprise fund and not have its contracts go to the executive council. The thought was make the liquor commission run more like a business and make it more streamlined and efficient, which sounds good, but I think we've lost some critical oversight.
It seems that way.
You have to wonder if we'd be facing a lawsuit now had the contract had a full open process in front of the governor and council. I tend to think we wouldn't see that kind of a lawsuit now. We wouldn't see folks filing protests against the process. And so that's one thing I've taken away from my first couple months is that the council plays an important role in making sure there's some sunshine on what happens in state government. When commissioners have to come up before governor and council and defend actions of their departments, they have to defend
That's not a good
contract.
thing. Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing, I think, when commissioners have to come to the governor and council and say,
Yes, but I mean,
hey,
it's not a good thing that they have to defend it, because that suggests there might be some problems.
That's right, but I think just the fact that there's review and oversight by the governor and council requires the commissioners to understand what's going on in their departments and make sure that money's being spent wisely, and that if they can't get up in a public setting and back one of the proposals that's on the agenda, then they're going to get a lot of tough questions.
Well, I know when I was reading the different news accounts, particularly of the warehouse issue, and the company that has held the contract for ever and ever and ever. I mean, some of the information was kind of hokey. Some of the numbers were kind of hokey. I mean, they really made you look at it and go, what is going on with them?
It's hard to know, and I wish I had answers. And we've even asked the Attorney General, if we could take a look at this case. Unfortunately, now there's a lawsuit, and so we just kind of have to back up and let that play out.
Until that plays out. Wow.
But, I would like to know what exactly went on and what the numbers are, because they've really been called into question. Not just by...
I mean, if you read just the news accounts,
you're right.
You
Not just by the
current
current warehousing company, but by a couple other bidders who were unsatisfied too.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, and I mean, even some of the money things didn't quite add up the way that you would expect they might.
Yes. So I hope the takeaway from this process is that, while we hope the Liquor Commission runs like a business, we can't totally remove oversight. And I think the governor and council oversight is really valuable. And I hope there's a law change so that these types of contracts can go back to governor and council. I mean, we're talking about a 20-year lease. If this is going to lock the state into something for a long period of time.
It's a very long period of time for a lease.
If you look at some purported savings, over 20 years, that really adds up. So we've got to make sure the state of New Hampshire is getting the best deal. I don't really have confidence that that happened in this case. Hopefully, the Attorney General with his review is ensuring that the process at least went forward in a fair and judicious manner. But now we're embroiled in a lawsuit, and so that's a whole different arena.
Which is going to cost us in the end too.
It is.
Now, what about this whole legislative report? What's your take on that?
I've read it, and I think there's some valuable things that were brought up in the report. I know the governor included in her budget reducing the 3-member liquor commission down to just one member. That would save some money, but I think would also increase accountability, because you would just have one person you're dealing with. So that's something the legislature will certainly sort out. And again, with the contracting issue, I think that's a key one that the report dealt with, and I think there's going to be a legislative change on that.
Now, what is Governor Hassan's major motivation to try to reduce it to one? I mean, she must have an overriding reason why she wants to do that.
I think, just for accountability reasons, and, to empower one person. I mean, we put folks in charge of Health and Human Services, which is a
one person,
billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar department, and that person is pretty wholly accountable to Governor Council and to the legislature. So I think it can work, and I think sometimes when you have 3, you might have people who are at odds on the commission, and I think we want to reduce that if that's ever present.
Now, how does it work now? Are these people all under contract, or are they more or less at will of the governor, or what?
No, they have a set term, like most of the commissioners do.
Okay.
And so we actually have, of the 3 slots, there's actually 1 vacancy at the moment. And there are other, so there are only 2 out of the 3 commissioners are serving right now. But I think she's not going to name anyone to that 3rd slot, pending sort of the legislation on, the makeup of the commission
itself. Yeah, it would seem like she would wait, unless she wants more grief.
That's right.
Okay, now, again, expanded gambling is way into the news. Is the council going to play any role in that whatsoever? I mean, obviously the legislature is, but what about the council? Is the council involved in any fashion?
Not at the moment. The council did actually have a contract, I think it was last session, to kind of set up an oversight body that might be involved in the eventuality that New Hampshire did adopt some kind of expanded gaming.
Now, would that have to be approved by the legislature?
I think there was some funding that was available for that, and there was a contract that Governor Lynch had put forward, but it was ended up being voted down. But we do name
Voted down by the council?
by the council,
yeah?
so it wasn't set up. So the question is about the regulatory authority and who would oversee the expanded gaming. One thought is put it with the Lottery Commission. Another thought is, well, we have this Racing and Charitable Gaming Commission. Could they somehow be involved? And so I think the legislature is going to sort that out. But we do name, obviously, the director of the lottery. We do name the members of the Racing and Charitable Gaming Commission. So we are involved in at least those organizations in terms of our relation to those folks that we appoint. I did have a tour recently, actually, of the racing and charitable gaming operations in New Hampshire. Some of the commissioners took me around, and for those folks who think that we don't have gambling going on in New Hampshire right now, are mistaken. In fact, for charity, you can go to Rockingham Park or Seabrook, or right on the beach in Hampton, and you can play blackjack or craps or roulette. So, the table games even are there. We might not have slot machines, but hard choices are going to have to be made in this budget cycle, and it's something that's on the table.
Especially where the governor has it as a source of income that we don't have yet.
You're right.
Somebody's going to have to do something.
That's right.
Now, if it goes through, will the council have the oversight on all of the various contracts and such like they do with other state agencies? I mean, say for instance, Rockingham, excuse me, is the chosen site. And obviously, if they want to turn it into a full-service casino, one of the things they need to worry about is food. So I would imagine there would be many caterers competing to get that contract to provide the food. Will just whoever's overseeing the track have the say-so on that, or will the Governor's Council be able to look at those things just like they do on all the other contracts and such?
I think the proposal, at least Senator D'Alessandro's bill, is not to have the state actually run the casino. So you'd have a bidding process that would occur where folks would pay an application fee, submit an application, and then an independent body would choose the actual recipient who would get the license. If they happen to be affiliated with Rockingham, the facility would be set up there, and the council really wouldn't be involved in any of those types of contracts that would come through.
So the contractor would make all the decisions?
Because a private company would be running the facility, and the state would be getting whatever cut the legislature deemed appropriate.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. I'm glad I asked you that because I didn't realize that.
But that could change because there are other bills in
and
that
the legislature could force that, couldn't it?
Yeah, there are other bills in to, for instance, have gambling at state liquor stores or have more of a state-run gambling operation. So in that case, that would be treated differently.
And the parking lots at the state liquor stores will be full. Yeah. Have to build more parking lots, right?
That's right.
What do you have a position that you want to give on whether or not you think there should be expanded gambling in New Hampshire?
I tend to think that we've seen a lot of pain in the last few budget cycles, and that we've got to come up with some more funding. And I think this could be a source where folks in New Hampshire support it, where it's going to have a minimal impact on, social, in terms of social costs on the people of New Hampshire. Look, we have Massachusetts who's putting in, several big casinos right south of our border. So we're going to see New Hampshire dollars leaving the state, going to fund Massachusetts priorities.
Leaving now.
That's right.
I mean, there are buses all over the state for crying out loud that go down to Foxwoods or Mohegan or whatever every day.
So if there's a way to responsibly capture those dollars, keep them in here in New Hampshire, and take care of things like the developmental disability wait list that we have, or the mental health care crisis that our state's facing.
Yeah, I understand Senator Morse had come up with a few different ideas for that.
And actually, I think 93 was one of the projects that he wanted to see as a recipient.
So that was kind of like putting a little sweet and low into the coffee cup and hoping that people would take a drink, right?
Well,
sort of.
If you saw the movie Lincoln, right, it took some extraordinary ends to pass the 13th Amendment, and Lincoln was doing what he could to curry favor with the
horse trading has started.
That's right.
Now, another subject, and I know this definitely came up during the campaign with all the candidates, the infamous Medicaid Management Information System that has been delayed again and again and again, and extensions and big costs and all the rest of it. Where are we at?
Allegedly, the system will be up.
Allegedly, I'm
glad
you said that.
And I hate to give hard and fast dates, but we're assured by the commissioner that the system will be up and running April.
And haven't we heard that before?
We have. We've heard it before. And there have been numerous extensions over a
Yeah.
7-year period of this thing.
It is 7 years now.
It is.
Good God.
We've gotten to the point where the vendor is now paying for any increased cost because of
Well, they kind of should be, shouldn't
the
they?
cost overruns because of the time issue. Yes, they absolutely should be.
I mean, at this
but
stage
it's
of
a
the game.
shame that we've gotten to this point where
Yeah.
we're so far behind the 8 ball. But now we've gotten, so we're going to get the system up and running. But we've got, the managed care of Medicaid, which the contracts that the state voted in just last year, and so you're looking at having to refashion the system so that it can.
From what they originally planned.
That's right, so that it can handle.
So that might take another 7 years.
It won't. I think it's just going to take sort of some tinkering right here at the end
Yeah.
to get it done. But I'm hopeful it gets up and running. Look, the state of New Hampshire is always kind of behind the curve in terms of
What have we spent
technology.
on that already? I know it's a staggering number.
It's somewhere between 80 and 100 million,
Wow.
I think. And most of that's federal funds, but I think it's about a 90-10
Yeah, but that's
split.
out of our pocket too.
Oh, that's right. That's right. But when you look at what's happening with healthcare costs these days, the costs are exorbitant. One of the
Yes,
ways
yes.
we can hopefully help manage that and mitigate increase in costs is to make sure we have a good system of technology as the backbone for the system. And so the hope is when this is up and running, we're going to be able to realize efficiencies in the system that we weren't under the old system.
Well, let's hope so, and especially after so much money and time has been
right.
expended toward it.
That's right. But then you don't want to get into a situation where the system's implemented,
Yeah.
it's up and running,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you've got to do an overhaul because
Oh, God.
eligibility
Yeah.
has changed
Yeah.
or something has come down where we have to tweak it.
Yeah, how much would that be affected by now Obamacare coming into play? And I know you're a Democrat and you don't want me to say Obamacare, but everybody
You
calls
can
it
say it.
Obamacare.
Well, even he said,
everybody
he
calls it that.
calls it Obamacare because he feels like he cares, right? But it is affected, and there has been additional funding that's come from the federal government so that we can tweak the eligibility in the system. So it should be able to handle what it needs to handle once it's online. And obviously, 2014 is the big question mark in terms of the Affordable Care Act. We have a lot of businesses and certainly providers who are kind of waiting anxiously as rules are rolled out, as the exchange is going to be rolled out in New Hampshire. I know as a small business owner, this is something that we're following very closely.
I would imagine.
We provide coverage to our full-time employees now, so we want to see what the burden's going to be going forward, what the exchange is going to look like, and what the whole picture is. And it's a little unclear right now.
Yeah,
and
it
so
is, yeah.
I think that causes some concern among folks. I know the council's been talking with the Commissioner of Insurance. We're going over there in a couple weeks, and this is going to be one of the issues we talk about. But yes, there's some concern, but I think we've got some great folks in New Hampshire who are partnering with the federal government to figure all this out.
Well, I think a lot of the concerns too are increased when we're hearing of companies, cutting people's hours and doing all kinds of things so that they won't have to pay for their health insurance anymore. And I think that has a lot of people very scared.
It does. But I think there are a lot of responsible employers who either already shoulder that burden or, are looking forward to working through the system to ensure that, that their employees are taken care of. And, that's a responsibility we all share. And I think, you can argue with the mandate, but, one of the things it tells us is that, we're all sort of responsible in our own way to purchase insurance. And whether or not you like that idea, it came from a conservative think tank, I think, originally. But until everyone's insured and is in the system, we're not going to be able to reduce costs. We're not going to be able to reduce the number of folks seeking care in emergency rooms. And so, I think that's an important element of the plan.
But with the cost of implementing the plan, are we really going to save anything?
That's the hope in the long term, that we
hope,
can bend the cost curve.
Yeah.
And it's not just ensuring everyone is a start, but it's about better integrating the care too, so that your doctors and folks at the hospital and folks at a health center are all talking and coordinating your care, so that they're not kind of working on their own or working in silos in a way that's going to increase costs.
Okay. Now, Governor Hassan also has lots of other nominations to make this year, most notably the Attorney General and people to the Department of Labor, Education, Agriculture, Revenue, Liquor. What are your thoughts? Because you get to interview for all intents and purposes, each and every one of these people,
Yes.
correct? Are there things that you as a council member are going to be asking or looking for, or positions that you're going to feel are very important that they have, or?
You know, in terms of the big picture, you've got to look at their qualifications and what their background is. You know, if you take this Department of Resources and Economic Development nominee, you know, he had great public and private service in terms of his work for BAE and in terms of his work for members of Congress. And, you know, putting those two pieces together, I think was important to make him a real stellar nominee. But in terms of other folks, making sure they have independence and aren't going to politicize their position, making sure they're going to be a team player and are going to work with the governor, the current one, and whoever the future governors that they might work with too. And really just having the mission of the department at heart and not any sort of personal or political agenda. I think that's really a top line thing for me. And having that level of experience is important too. But you know, when you get into these specific cases, different departments have different needs, and so you can ask different questions. I mean, we're going to be dealing with a nominee for the Commissioner of Banking soon, and so we've been getting a lot of input, you know, from folks who have had dealings with the banking department over the years, both banks and private citizens who may have some concerns, and so those are some questions that. You know, we're going to be asking, you know, the person who's been nominated for that post.
Now, as a native of Massachusetts, and this would be no surprise to you, you actually lived down there for a while when you were in college, so, you know, a lot of these appointments are made simply because campaigners or big donors are being rewarded. And
not in New Hampshire, but
in
other
Massachusetts,
states.
yeah. And I mean, it happens all the time down there, and maybe that's one of the reasons that chaos ensues all the time. So, kind of from what you just said, I'm thinking that you feel as though New Hampshire does a way better job at putting the right people into these positions than happens in Massachusetts.
Honestly, I haven't looked too closely at the Massachusetts system, so I'm not sure how it's.
Always has been.
Maybe if
Probably
you're a native,
always
you have a little bit more expertise than I do. But I think New Hampshire gets it right, and I think you look at folks like John Lynch and the team he was able to assemble. It's a real impressive group of commissioners. And as I've gone around to the departments,
with backgrounds in the fields that
that's right. And I've gone around to almost every department now, met with the commissioners one-on-one, got to know their departments and their staffs.
You've had a chance to do that already?
Absolutely. And it's been a real refreshing experience because the takeaway is that we've got some very competent people who are real independent-minded and are really devoted to doing the work and the mission of their individual departments. And so I think Governor Hassan's going to have a hard time sort of topping, the team that Governor Lynch was able to assemble because they are that good by and large.
Well, of course, New Hampshire too. I mean, and again, it depends who you talk to, whether they see it as an advantage or a disadvantage. In New Hampshire, obviously, somebody is appointed and they're not automatically out when the next governor comes in, whereas in Massachusetts, they pretty much are. I mean, they pretty much put in their resignation because they know that the new governor coming in is going to have a clean sweep.
That's right. No, I mean, the commissioners don't serve at the pleasure of the governor of New Hampshire because they do have a fixed term, and some outlast the governor that initially appointed them. So, commissioners can be have a level of independence, but I think the folks that we have are real team players. I think of Chris Clement at the Department of Transportation.
I hear so many good things about him.
Really optimistic, energetic, knows what we've got to do to grow our economy, and it has so much to do with infrastructure. And so he lives and breathes the mission of his department, and people really respect him. And even folks like Councilor Sununu, who I believe voted against him in the first go-round, is now one of his biggest fans.
Is that right?
And thinks he does a great job. And so, I think that we've got some great folks involved. And my feeling is that the council has been very fair-minded and very bipartisan in putting folks like Chris Clement in this position.
Are any of the, well, actually, I guess, who she nominated for Dred, he's a Republican, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was going to ask you if Maggie Hassan had, stuck strictly with party lines, but then it came to me that he is a Republican.
We've had a few nominations so far to some, minor, and and you know, some boards and commissions, and I couldn't tell you what the party affiliation is.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. I mean, that's
unless
refreshing
I don't know,
to hear.
and I wouldn't even ask.
Yeah,
really.
no, that's refreshing to hear because
Yeah.
I mean we've all known politicians who everything was by the party,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean it's great to be loyal to your party, but it may not necessarily be the best answer all the time.
You're right.
as we all know.
You're right.
Yeah. I was going to ask you what your experience had been with other councilors and department heads and such, but you kind of already answered that.
We've had a good working relationship with this council, and
Yeah.
we have some folks, you know, who have some experience. There are a couple of us like myself who are brand new to the council, and so I think we've had a good mix of experience and kind of new eyes, and it's been great so far. Councilor Burton has served 35 years now. He's served with
Served a long
more than
time, yeah.
He's served with 10
Yeah.
governors, and actually
Amazing, huh?
he's ailing, and
Is he?
but
Yeah.
he's going to be fine. He's going through a little bit of cancer right now.
Oh, yeah, I guess I
So
did
he's been
hear
calling
that,
into our
yeah.
meetings, but getting to know him and his
Yeah.
level of expertise has been really great. Chris Sununu is a good guy, and I've enjoyed working with him. And we've got Deb Pignatelli from Nashua and Colin Van Ostern from Concord. And yeah, really optimistic about this term.
Yeah? Yeah, well, that's good to hear.
Yes.
You know, you're not going into like a war situation.
No,
you know?
not at all.
Do you hear much from your constituents?
Yes.
Yeah?
And in fact,
You're getting bombarded with
that's
emails every
one
day?
of the surprises, the level of engagement and the
Yeah?
level of response I've been getting from people, and I'm loving it. You know, if I can ever be of help to anyone, you know, I really would encourage people to contact me either by email or on the phone, and maybe we can get that number up here.
Oh, that'll be on the screen.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll
absolutely.
have your email
But,
address up
you
there.
know,
Do you want your phone on there too? Or
Sure.
Not? Yeah?
Put it all up
Okay,
there because
and we'll also put your website up there.
Great. Because I think it's important that folks know if they're having a problem with state government, if they have a question or concern, you know, an executive counselor is often a good place to start because we can get answers directly from these departments, from the commissioners. And so, you know, helping constituents navigate state government is just such an important part of what I do. And, you know, I've enjoyed working with people. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on some of the governor's nominations and some of the contracts that have come up. And so if you have any thoughts or concerns about things in the future, please feel free to contact me, and would love
Well,
to
it's good to
talk
know.
with you about
Because
it.
I think sometimes people are hesitant.
Oh, it shouldn't be at all.
No, but I think they are.
And that's part of what makes New Hampshire such a great you know, state to live and work and do business and raise a family, is that we've got such an open and accessible form of government. And you know, when you talk to folks in business, and you know, as we're talking about economic development, companies are really impressed with coming to New Hampshire and being able to very directly talk to the governor or talk
Yeah.
to their
Yeah, it's a lot
elected
easier in
officials.
this state than a lot of
And
states. Yeah.
you know, the access that they have is really just incredible. And I like to think that you know, we're a lot more responsive than you might find in some other states.
Now,
like
I kinda-
the state to the south.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah. You know, I kind of randomly pulled out a couple of different issues, you know, both carryovers from last year and that were going on during the campaign that all the candidates had to take a position on, and then a couple of the ones that either have updated or kind of there right now. But you're in there and I'm not. So I'm sure you know other issues that you might want to talk about that, you know, that I haven't asked you a thing about, because this is a free-for-all. I mean, you can talk about whatever you want. So are there, you know, any subjects that you think people need to be aware of? Are you looking for input, or are those subjects that are going to come, you know, rising to the top of the milk bottle? Or
Well, one of the things, just taking a step back, I mean,
Yeah.
this has been a fun process, and I'm really glad the campaign's behind us. And you probably are too, with the number of shows you were doing.
Yeah, by the end of it. Yeah, I enjoyed it fully. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was really so much fun getting to know everybody, and every candidate was different. And it was a lot of fun doing it. But by the time we had done that rep, which would have
That's
been
right.
that debate that you were in, it was like, thank God that's over.
Glad it was over.
Yeah, because it was very intense,
And I think
yeah.
the general public's pretty glad the campaign's over. But it's been good transitioning into this new role, and I've learned so much, you know, about state government, about, you know, the folks that work for our state. We've got some great state employees, by the way, who are doing a pretty bang-up job. you know, they've gone through a few years of budget cuts and staffing cuts, and so they're looking to do more with less. And I think all of our commissioners know that finding efficiencies is really, you know, their top priority. You know, they were asked to reduce their budgets in their budget proposal this year again. So they're having to kind of refashion things to the new reality of, you know, revenues that just aren't growing, you know, as fast as they used to. But, you know, the council's really involved in that effort to find efficiencies and to work with departments, you know, to, you know, make sure the contracts are the best deal for the state, and to make sure that, you know, we can come up with some ideas for state government to make it run a little bit better. And so I would just ask if there's anything out there, you know, folks work for state government, or if they have ideas for New Hampshire, you know, that's something that we can help bring to the fore and have a discussion on. You know, we've had ideas already, you know, to reduce paperwork and to computerize things a little bit more. You know, there's some thoughts
Which could be a huge cost saving.
That's right. There's some thoughts about the contracting process and how to make that a little bit more effective for our state, pooling resources from different departments in terms of purchasing power, you know, kind of centralizing, you know, administrative functions of departments. That's something that the last council actually worked on. So streamlining and making government more efficient is something we've got to always look at. The council's very involved in it, so if folks have ideas on that, we'd love to hear that.
Now, UNH, of course, obviously remains a subject because they had a lot of money cut from them last year, and obviously there are strong efforts now going on to restore at least some, if not all, of that money. How much of the whole UNH thing does the council get involved in, or is that just like a totally different thing that you people have nothing to say about?
It's really just a legislative prerogative.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you know, the university system and the community college system in New Hampshire is something that should concern us all, because it really represents the future of our state. And, you know, one of the things I've been talking a little bit about as I go and talk to groups and other leaders is that we've got to have a focus on retaining young talent here in New Hampshire and making sure that, you know, folks who go through the university system don't leave the state, but that they have options right here to get a job or to build a business. And we've got some great startups. We've got some great business incubators in different corners of the state. And I think we've got to work on creating more of a culture for especially our high-tech sector. But to sort of reinforce and to create a culture that is welcoming, you know, to younger people who may be looking at moving to Boston or New York. We want them staying right here in New Hampshire with their talents and ideas and their work ethic. And that's going to help us attract companies, and it's going to help us attract, you know, some great ideas from around the region. So that's something we've been pushing, and I think it's something the governor understands. She talks a lot about innovation.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, she did during her campaign as well. Yeah.
And I think that's why, getting back to the university system, that's such a high priority for her. You know, New Hampshire students graduate with, I think, the highest debt burden of students of any state across the country. And so that's something that, you know, has got to be dealt with. You know, kids are taking out basically a mortgage to get an education, and when they do so in a job environment that isn't that welcoming, it doesn't have a lot of options for them. It's a tough situation.
Well, right now, especially. Yeah.
That's right. So we've got to make sure the university system has support. I think the governor, you know, got an agreement from them that there would be a tuition freeze, at least in the short run, if they did get some increased funding from the legislature. I think that's a good step forward. But I think we've got to make sure that the university system can partner successfully with private businesses, and that it's a catalyst for increased business development and for attraction of talent to our state. That's the top thing that I hear when I talk to, you know, business leaders in New Hampshire. You know, the labor force has got to be strong. It's got to be vibrant. It's got to have the skills necessary to support the, you know, the functions of their businesses.
Now, another a lightning rod definitely would be education in the state, and obviously so much of that is governed by the New Hampshire Department of Education. And again, I mean, maybe I should know this, but does the Governor's Council have any play in there at all? Because obviously we're dealing with gazillions of dollars every year.
That's right.
So, I mean, like, I know you have to approve federal grants and such on, you know, all the other departments. do you play that same role with education, or is that just its own separate little world and entity out there?
No, you know, their contracts, the federal money that's coming in,
Yeah.
you know, will come through the council. We do name, you know, the Commissioner of Education and the members of the Board of
Okay.
Education.
Yeah.
We don't name them. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a vote on the governor's nomination for those positions. So we are involved in that way. You know, the governor just nominated someone as the director of the Division of Instruction. That's coming up at our next meeting, and I just talked with her. She's actually a resident of Bedford. Her name's Heather Gage. Sounds like a well-qualified individual. So, you know, so we are involved in that
You are
regard,
involved.
but you know, not to the level of, you know, deciding funding mechanisms and deciding which district is getting.
But you
know,
would
what piece of
decide,
the pie.
though, if the state accepts money.
That's right.
So then, oh, my little
Uh-oh.
evil mind now is jumping ahead. There's certainly issues, you know, related to education that people get fired up about on both sides of the issue. And certainly one of the things that you hear people get extremely passionate about, both pro and con, is something like Common Core, for example. That if federal money is accepted on different type of educational grants and such, the caveat is you also have to implement X program that the feds like, and I believe Common Core is one of them. So if, say, for instance, there was an outcry, you know, that the state had this great opportunity to get this big chunk of money from the feds for education, but, you know, it had that caveat that you must do this and this must be in every school or whatever, and there was some real, you know, battling going on in the communities. The council could effectively say, you know what, we're not accepting this money, and you guys got to get the whole mess straightened out. Could you do that?
Well, I can't make any promises, but
No, but I mean, could you?
but really, you know, I'm not sure when.
I'm not saying would you. I'm saying could you?
Well, I just don't know the timing of when that comes through and how
Oh,
far
no,
out
no,
that
no. I mean,
process is.
you know, and again, I'm just like kind of pulling out because I don't know if there's any. Probably any money that came in on something like that's already been long done. But I mean, you know, with education, there's always some new
That's right.
program or project
That's right.
that's coming
and
out.
we've got to be careful with. You're right.
But the governor's council could, correct?
Depending on the issue and how it looks, yes.
Wow.
I just
wonder
don't.
if people realize that.
I just don't.
Do you know I might have just pulled the top off a hornet's nest
Really?
for you
Really?
and other people in the council?
Well, I just haven't seen enough of you know, the contracts
Yeah,
that have
no,
been
I
coming over from
understand. I
education
understand.
and some of the funding.
But I just was curious
so I'd
because
like
you
to-
don't really have a say on UNH, but you could have a say. I mean, if people were really passionate about one of these issues and went up and started lobbying everybody on the council or showing up at hearings or whatever.
I think we're all ready to get lobbied on
Wow.
any particular issue that's
Wow.
that's on the agenda, and as things come up.
You gonna hate me someday because I let people know
No,
that?
no.
No?
As things come up, and we'll see when and if those things would come before the council, want to have a dialogue about it
Yeah.
and want to hear from people.
Yeah.
And I go into these kind of debates with no preconceived notions. We've got to look at how it impacts communities and families, and let's hear some more about it.
I'm getting a sign held up to me that you better not go overtime, Kathleen. All right, well, listen, you've been fun to have, and it's been great, you
Thanks.
know, kind of talking to you, and it'll be fun to have you back in a couple more months and see, you know, how much your thinking may have changed or expanded or whatever, too, and especially with new subjects. So I've got, like, maybe I can give you a minute to look at the camera and give out a last message.
Sure. Appreciate
There
it.
you
Thank you,
go.
Kathy. And
Thank
it's always
you.
a
Thanks
pleasure
for coming.
to come by the show, and I like that we had no earthquake today during this this telecast.
Not that we know of, at
That's
least.
right. That's right. Not that we know of. But there's so many significant issues facing the state, including our transportation needs, including our healthcare needs, and a lot of that business comes right through the Executive Council. And so I really would encourage you to you know, get engaged and contact me anytime I can be of service, or anytime you have a thought or a concern about state government. I really want to be an advocate for the communities of this district, including Bedford, and whatever I can do to be of service, I'm there for you and there for the community. So my cell phone number, 867-8438, my email and website should be up on the screen too. And please give a holler. As I said, anytime you need me or anytime I can help you navigate state government, I certainly would love to love the opportunity to do that. So thanks so much.
And I think I neglected to tell you that you're actually going to be on the spin-off, the Tell It Like It Is spin-off that is called Tell It Like It Is with Public Officials, and now you're a bona fide public official.
Excellent.
So see, you're graduating into our
That's right.
other show, huh? Chris, thanks a lot
Thanks,
for coming.
Kathy.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
appreciate
and
it.
we'll have you back again soon.
Thanks. Anytime.
Okay, well, you got to hear our new governor's counselor, and I'm sure he gave you lots to think about, which is what we want. And thank you for watching, and come back for the next one. And until then, bye-bye.